Happy May 29th, everyone. We are reaching the end of our Mercury retrograde now. It'll be turning direct on June 3rd here in Canada, anyways. Might be a little different where you are. And it's actually turning direct on the 26th degree of Taurus, which I find very interesting because there's a star called Algol, which is actually considered Medusa's head in the sky. And I don't know if anyone's thinking of the same legend I'm thinking of Medusa, because there's a couple different versions. At some point, she gets her head cut off and returned to, I believe it's Athena, the person who turned her in person, the god that turned her into Medusa in the first place. And the star Algol is considered evil because it's Medusa's eye. And what's actually interesting is it is two stars that rotate around each other. So if you ever see that star in the sky, it looks like it's winking at you. And when Mercury turns direct again, it's actually turning direct right over Algol. And it's very common for associations with Algol to be related to losing your head. And Mercury is the planet of mind. So it won't be that unusual if we get a little out of our heads this coming week. Just to let you know, it will pass, but it's all part of the planets. Just a reminder to anyone, if you want to see your birth chart and where this Mercury transit is happening, I do have a video on my website, Shadowcraft Cult, Introduction to Astrology. And you can also email me if you have any questions about that or shadow work in general. Anytime you want, my contact information is on the website. This week we are working on boundaries. And boundaries are a really important topic in my mind. I think the really challenging thing with boundaries is that a lot of times we think that boundary setting is ultimatums towards other people. So essentially, we say to someone, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this, which is in some ways a bit like a boundary and it relates, but it's not exactly what it is. Boundaries are not for other people. And people don't really recognize that when they set them. They think it's going to be punitive, it's going to be controlling, it's going to be about getting other people to do what you want. But what a boundary actually is recognizing your own needs in life and setting yourself up to only accept people that react or behave within that parameter. So the boundaries aren't for other people, they're for you. They're kind of like a generic way of setting things up so that you know on a subconscious level that you are there for yourself. So it's teaching yourself that you are worthy of being treated with kindness and love and patience and all those good things. And then reinforcing that boundary in a way that if anyone defies what you know you deserve, they are essentially removed from your life or limited to their access to you. And when we set healthy boundaries and we respect these boundaries, what happens is we start to feel safer with ourselves and we stop looking externally for that feeling of safety and love and acceptance. So essentially, you really do actually build that internal self acceptance by setting boundaries. And that's just like one of the benefits. There's lots of them. But just on a deeper level, if you ever find yourself always kind of out searching for other people to love you and treat you well, and you always say to yourself, if I just meet the right person that actually loved me, I'll be happy. What actually needs to happen is you need to set a boundary for how people treat you and teach yourself that you love yourself. And when you teach yourself that you love yourself, when people do shitty things to you, you just remove them or block them in a way that prevents them from doing it again. And in doing that, you feel loved because you loved yourself. I know that's kind of, we don't talk about self-love. Usually it's like something like, oh, go get a massage or paint your nails. But self-love is creating a safe space for yourself and respecting yourself in a way that prevents other people from disrespecting you. So moving into boundaries, we are going to start with our journal questions as usual. And I will put them in the bottom in the notes so you can look at them if I go too fast or you want to review them again. The first question is, what do people do that makes me feel taken advantage of? What do people do that makes me feel violated? What am I afraid will happen if I tell them to stop? And was I allowed to have boundaries as a child? Relating to last week, we talked about needs. And boundaries really are about needs and getting those needs met and preventing ourselves from spending too much energy trying to please other people to get our needs met, instead, only accepting behavior that meets our needs. In order to do that, we need to look at what our boundaries need to be. We're going to start out on a really higher up level. I know last week we journaled and did a spider diagram about what our needs are so that we can actually start to move towards setting boundaries to gain them. So what we want to look at first in this practice is what are our overall big needs? So usually there's like a Maslow's hierarchy, I need food, I need water, I need shelter, those basics, which for some people are going to be a lot more obvious because they might not be being met. And for other people are going to be maybe not that important because they meet them easily. And that's just sometimes a locational thing, a cultural thing. Sometimes it's just where you were born, and it's not a judgment thing. If the needs that are at your highest point right now are food or shelter or safety, I think it's important to point out that not all of us have the privilege of having our needs be something that feels more societally important, like friendships or meaningful jobs, because some of us are going to have needs that are just super at the bottom foundation of our lives, but so fundamental. Because if you aren't able to get the food you need or find the housing you need to make you feel safe and being able to afford that housing, then sometimes those other needs that other people get to focus on just aren't going to be able to make a difference for you. You aren't even going to be able to focus on them the way you'd like to, because the more foundational needs are going to drag you down unless you focus on them first. So it's important to honor them and respect and honor that that's where we're at, instead of trying to be somewhere society tells us we should be at, like that my needs are to be a super high achieving something, when really what your need is to have a house that feels safe for you. So we're just going to write down what our biggest needs are. And then we want to look at needs that relate to those. So going from the concept of, say, you need to eat food that's healthy for you. Maybe part of that is looking at not spending money on things that you don't need, but it also might be on maybe taking a second job, maybe you are not going to go out with your friends as much and you're going to have to say no to them more because you need to spend this money on food that makes you feel healthy and happy. So that's just like one idea. And so we started out with our big idea at the top of what our need is, like we did last week with the spider diagram. And then we moved down to like lower level ways we're going to meet those needs. And then we're going to write a boundary contract. So this contract is just with you. Remember that boundaries are not for other people. They're for you yourself to feel protected. If you're relating to the food one, our boundary might be, I will not spend money on extracurricular activities unless I have this much money in my bank account. And then we enforce that boundary by, say, if a friend calls and asks to do something, we look at our budget and decide if we actually are falling within that boundary. So that's how we use these contracts. That's where you're setting your boundary. And again, it's not a punishment thing. It's just the ability to state, this is outside of my comfort zone for me trying to live my life in a way that's helpful for myself. So it gives you that little added ability to recognize what you need and how to enforce getting that need met. Obviously, there's going to be different needs, like you want a relationship. You're going to be going, I will only accept people that speak to me kindly. That's like a simple boundary that we're going to write down. But whatever you want to focus on today, obviously you're not going to want to do all your boundaries all at once. Maybe that's something you spread out over a couple weeks, or as the topic comes up where you're feeling violated or you're feeling taken advantage of, you focus on writing that contract with yourself. And I'm not pushing anyone to enforce these boundaries right now, but I do think writing them down starts to develop your awareness of when people are taking advantage of you. And it naturally pulls you towards caring for yourself more, because just writing down a boundary teaches you that you know on some level that you deserve to be taken care of, even though you might be the only person able to do that. Try to make them exact and specific. Sometimes if they're too vague, it's hard to tell what you're trying to enforce. And the general idea is that if people or things are breaking your boundaries, you're either going to put less energy and time into those people, or you might have to cut them out of your life. And it's not always people, it's activities and things we need to cut out of our lives until we get to a point where we feel safe. That's the practice, and hopefully it kind of helps you moving in that direction and gives you a better idea of how boundaries work. For our grounding exercise, we're going to do meditation on our sort of solid resistance that is in our lives, which are almost like a subconscious boundary that we set up, but it's not necessarily one that helps us. There's a challenge with this sort of energetic pushing out that we do on a subconscious level against people around us and situations that are occurring. And we think it keeps us safe, but that sort of energy actually prevents us from flowing and moving in the way that we need to. So in this grounding exercise, we're going to focus on dissolving those boundaries and allowing energy to flow so that we can react to a situation in the moment that it's happening without all that baggage that comes along with the sort of fear that creates resistance. It's actually better to dissolve that experience completely of pushing out and just be almost as if we're water. Like nothing can actually touch us. It can move through us, but it can't stop us. And that sort of nature is really beneficial to letting things pass us that we don't want to come at us, and also allowing ourselves to move where we need to move. So obviously we're not physically doing all this. This is more of a subconscious, emotional, energetic experience. So we're going to work with that. What we're going to do is either sitting or lying down with our eyes closed, as we always start, taking a few deep breaths. And we always like to relax our jaw, relax our shoulders. Notice if you're holding tension just below your ribs. Take a few deep breaths there to release that energy. So to start noticing our boundaries, what we're going to do is just feel the solidness of our bodies. So as you're breathing, I want you to feel the boundaries of your skin, where you stop. Really notice where you're pressing into the ground or the seat. Really notice what's holding you together, the solidness of you. And notice if there's any part of yourself that feels a sort of pushing outness. It'll feel like a pressure inside sometimes, or just like a tension that doesn't want to dissolve. And we're not doing anything with that energy right now. We're just noticing it and breathing into it. Just trying to let ourselves be as heavy and solid as we need to be. And then we move in the other direction. And we're going to start noticing our own airiness. Every time you inhale, feel that air filling you and just moving right through you as if you don't exist at all. And anywhere you feel tension or heaviness, I want you to feel the space that exists there. The total empty non-existence. And if you feel any pushing out, any solidness, any pressure, filling it with air and letting it be perfectly transparent, light, and almost non-existent. As if you are made of air. Taking a few more breaths. And when you're ready, you can come back to your body and let your breath return to normal. All right, thank you for doing this practice with me this week. And I hope it helps you figure out where the edges of your life are and learn to protect and guard yourself when you need to. And we'll see you next week.